The disappearance of my neighbor. For years, the apartment across the hall from mine was empty. No one ever moved in, and the landlord never put up a for rent sign. It was just this silent, dusty space I'd pass by every day. But then, one day, the door was slightly ajar. I could hear the faint sound of a piano playing. It was unsettling, because no one was supposed to be living there. A week later, I noticed a man going in and out. He was tall, with dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days. He wore the same black coat every day, and barely spoke to anyone. I assumed he was a new tenant, but something about him felt off, like he was hiding something. He never made eye contact, never smiled, and always seemed to be watching his back. One night, I was taking out the trash when I saw him struggling to carry a large, heavy bag down the stairs. It was weird, given that the elevator was right there. The bag looked like it could barely fit through the doorway. It was the kind of bag you see hikers use when they're off to scale a mountain, except it was stuffed to the brim, almost bursting. The way he was dragging it, as if it weighed a ton, made my stomach twist. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I decided to follow him, keeping a distance. He went out the back entrance, where the streetlights barely illuminated the alley. The darkness swallowed him as he dumped the bag into the trunk of an old, beaten-up car. Then, he stood there for a moment, looking around like he was making sure no one saw him. I ducked behind a dumpster, holding my breath. He eventually got into the car and drove off into the night. The next morning, I noticed something strange. A red stain seeping out from under his apartment door. It looked like paint, but it was thick and dark. I knocked on his door, pretending to be concerned, but there was no answer. A chill ran down my spine as I backed away. Later that night, I decided to call the police anonymously. They showed up, knocked on his door, but there was no response. After a while, they left, telling me they couldn't do much without a warrant or evidence of a crime. The landlord even stopped by, but shrugged it off, saying the tenant was probably just out, but he never came back. Days turned into weeks, and there was no sign of him. I kept seeing that stain though. It didn't fade or dry up. It seemed to get darker and more pronounced every day. I couldn't take it anymore, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. One night, armed with a flashlight and a sense of dread, I picked the lock to his apartment. I know it was illegal, but curiosity and fear had consumed me. The air inside was thick and stale, filled with a sickly sweet smell that made me gag. The lights didn't work, so I had to use my flashlight. The living room was empty except for a single chair and a dusty piano. The same piano I had heard playing that very first day. The keys were cracked and stained with what looked like dried blood. I took a deep breath and walked further inside. The red stain led me to a closed door at the end of the hallway. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I opened the door slowly. The room was dark except for a faint light coming from the window, casting eerie shadows. My flashlight beam landed on something horrifying. Photographs plastered all over the walls. Pictures of people from our building, including me. Some were taken in the hallway, others from outside my window. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This man had been watching us for who knows how long. But the worst part was the bed in the center of the room. It was covered with a black tarp, and beneath it, I could see a vague, human-like shape. I didn't need to lift the tarp to know what was underneath. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp that crashed to the floor. I ran out, my heart racing, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I called the police again, this time frantic, telling them everything I saw. They arrived within minutes, swarming the building. They broke down the door and stormed inside. I watched from the hallway, my knees shaking. When they emerged, they were pale and silent, their faces grim. One officer looked at me and shook his head, confirming my worst fear. The news broke the next morning. The man had been a wanted criminal, hiding in plain sight. He had lured multiple victims to his apartment over the years. The authorities found remains, evidence of his gruesome crimes, and a list of future targets. My name was on it, circled in red. It was like a nightmare come to life. I moved out the next week, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. To this day, I can still hear the faint sound of that piano playing whenever I close my eyes. The room across the hall has been sealed off since then, and no one talks about it. But sometimes, Late at night, when the building is quiet, I swear I hear footsteps and a soft, haunting melody echoing through the walls.